Wait, what's our intro? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Democracy is Sexy. Today we are with Dr. Cynthia Pellick, and we're going to be exploring is democracy really that sexy? So today we are going to be covering its flaws and what are some alternatives to these flaws that maybe we could possibly solve, or like some solutions that we can come up with. And today we actually have a guest speaker on our podcast, so I'm going to pass it over so that she can introduce herself.
Hello, listeners. My name is Professor Cynthia Pellick, and I am an associate professor of sociology here at New Mexico State University. And I'm just finishing up my 17th year as an Aggie.
Great. And I was going to ask, where are you originally from?
Detroit, Michigan.
Wow. So you come a far way.
Yeah. Wow.
And what brought you here?
Job.
Just honest answer. That's good.
Luckily.
Yeah.
Gratefully. Wonderfully.
Well, I guess we can get right into
I guess we can just get straight into the big first question.
Sure.
What are democracy's flaws? That's obviously a pretty loaded question. So
It sure is right off the bat, but it's a good question.
Yeah. What were your initial thoughts with this question?
I thought, well, we get into the flaws right before the good stuff, the sexy stuff.
Yeah. Good point.
So that was my first reaction. And so after thinking about it and sort of thinking about, okay, what is democracy? It's always a good sort of first, and understanding that the United States, we have a representative democracy, not a direct democracy, where we, in our country, not everybody is in the decision-making roles, but we vote and elect representatives to represent our interests, to participate and make the democracy work. So that's my first. And then my second thought was our democracy in practice is often comes down to a balance of private interest and public interest.
Right.
And this is where the flaws come in terms of the often imbalance of private interest and public interest. And that can stem for many different things, which I suppose we could talk about as flaws or weaknesses in the system. Should I keep on going?
just kind of looking into who is excluded and underrepresented in this system. I think that's probably one of the biggest things.
It is, for sure. So who are our representatives in Congress, the federal level or the local level?
Right.
And at the federal level, most or average representative are quite wealthy, quite old, quite white.
There's a big misrepresentation.
Yeah, there's, it's not a representative body of our population. And so that raises questions of flaws. How could
Yeah.
an unrepresentative body
And I think even looking
represent
at the
interest?
Our New Mexico Congress, the way it works is they're not even getting paid. So the people that are there, they have to have the money to these are people obviously in power, because if you didn't have power, you would not be able to be in that position, spend so much time there if you weren't making money from somewhere else. So I think that the way that's set up is already kind of accommodating for what you were saying, if that makes sense.
Exactly. That's exactly, I agree with that. And then if we look at sort of an equivalent at the federal level, you need so much money to actually compete
Right.
and run for office. So you do get paid, but which is different. But the money still is an issue.
Yeah.
Lack of representation,
Like,
fully, yeah.
And then I guess like when we're talking about like the like people in power, kind of going back to like
What?
the play like we just did in class with like capitalism, like I think that all ties in like really well.
do you guys want to mention that? Give me a little
Oh,
quick summary.
yeah.
Sure.
So, well, Dr. Pollock is my professor. So recently in class we did a play on I guess kind of like a dystopian what was it called? Satir? I can't say the word. Satirical.
Dystopian fiction,
Yeah, it was
social scientific
kind of just
fiction.
calling out like the billionaires and like the CEOs that are basically just running like our country and like kind of putting their money like over like the general, like the 1% versus the 99%, and like how they control like policy and like government, and how we're just really unrepresented in all of that, and it's kind of causing this like civil unrest, I guess is what the play was about.
Yeah. And it was about the civil unrest of 2011, which was the Occupy movement, the 99%. So it kind of, like we started talking about the private interest being the 1% rich folks and the 99% being the less powerful folks, but the public interest. So it was a play about that, and it was pretty powerful.
What I thought was most interesting was that like if you would have said it was like now, like you could it's still like so relevant to like
Yes.
what we're going through now. Like you could just change the date and like it would still be, I mean, as true as it was then as it is now. So
Yeah.
that was pretty scary.
Yeah, that's why dystopian fictions, if they're like, often they're written such that they're more generalizable across time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I enjoyed it. I've been doing that for some 15 years, or maybe not quite, about 10, 12 years, and learn more about it. Every time I do it, see different things, and it rings true in different ways, depending on the context, the immediate context in which the students read the play. So, yeah.
Was there any other flaws that you noticed? No, there's quite a few.
Yeah, I did jot down a couple to, and I think you mentioned it before we start recording, the question of accountability
Oh, yeah.
in violations of the rule of law, especially. Our democracy is based on the rule of law and accountability. And when that doesn't happen, or that accountability system is weak or can be undermined, it thus undermines the democracy. So, whether that be the flaw of our lack of representation in the U.S. Senate, for example, the 2 senators per state representing the whole country, even though some states have very little population,
Right.
some states have extreme population. So that's, I think, in terms of democracy, the structure which is based in the Constitution of how we develop our Senate is inherently, I would think, flawed. I mean, there's positive and negatives of everything in systems, but that has seemed to be where decisions of the Senate are not looking like the opinions and interest of the larger population because of that representational weakness.
Right. And like, so what like structural changes do you think like would have to be made to like, because obviously that's like, I mean, I feel like we've been trying to figure this out for a while. So, and I think just because of how big this like United States are, that makes it like a lot
Very
harder
difficult.
as well. So,
Yeah. In terms of accountability and transparency, I think that issue there's change could be happen at every level, from, you know, equity in education to equity in the workforce, in accountability. So when I say equity and fairness, it's the accountability and the transparency that determines the level of accountability and the level of transparency we have.
I like that you use the word equity.
Yeah.
I recently just learned that there's a big difference between equity and equality.
Awesome.
Which,
It's an important
it's a big difference. You know, equality, you know, you give everyone like the same resources, but they might not all need the same resources. But equity,
yes.
you give everyone the different opportunity resources so that we can all
Right.
live life.
Right.
Yeah.
I learned about it in high school. Like, they showed me a picture in high school with like the people on the fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
I know that one
the
too.
boxes, and then but they're like different heights, obviously. So like,
They all got
Right.
different amount of
Yeah.
hardship. But
yeah, and I saw that and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So the treatment doesn't have to be necessarily the same, but it has to be fair, because we're all differently positioned,
right.
located
Yeah,
in the society.
Yeah, because I think, you know, we all we're a big country and we all come from different, varying types of opportunities, but we're all I feel like we need to focus more, not rather on the opportunities that we're given, but the outcome, you know, what we need from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's another higher level of understanding this issue. Opportunities and outcomes,
yeah.
actual benefits, actual consequences. And we embrace, equal opportunities. But there's widespread disagreement in terms of the belief that we should balance outcomes.
And it's,
Yeah. You all are quite educated on the topic.
trying.
we have a long way to go, but
No, this ties in well with last episode, obviously, because we were talking about accountability and I think honestly all of these are really intertwined.
Yes.
They're all
Overlapping.
very crucial and important. And then I guess going into the next unless there was more you wanted to add for this
flaws.
question, the flaws.
Yeah, I did want to say something about the humongous, large wealth inequality that we have.
Right. Yeah.
We touched on that, but we at present are experiencing unprecedented amount of concentration of wealth and power in a very few hands.
Yeah, I wrote down a statistic that said the top 1% own 31% of all U.S. wealth, and that's just that's the 1%. So I mean, that's just crazy to think about.
Right, absolutely. And that has warped quite a bit from how our taxes are taken from us,
Right.
and who is burdened by that. Of course, a lot of the capitalist interest that and the corporate control that we feel in our everyday lives today. So all those have a real impact on voting and representation and accountability. And I think why that is important is there have been new Supreme Court decisions that have impacted that that balance of power and wealth, like the Citizens United U.S. Supreme Court decision. Are you familiar with that?
could you tell us more?
Yeah, and I hope I get it right. But it was a decision made by the United States Supreme Court in a case that was brought against the Hillary Clinton campaign for president back when she ran. And the case was about balancing the public interest and the candidate's interest regarding money that comes from PACs, political action committees. And it used to be that there was regulation on disclosing information on who was giving to candidates, and there was a really clear divide between candidates, where they're getting their money and how it's disclosed, and how political action committees spend money and coordinate with committees. So that was a game changer in the sense of a lot of the dark money coming into our electoral process, where you don't know where the money's coming from in the interest. So that was, I can't get the date right and when that happened, but you were in high school at that time. I'm sure it's not that old. And it is one of the agendas of pro-democracy groups to get that Supreme Court decision overturned,
Right.
so that the dark money is no longer having such an incredible influence.
Yeah, and like talk about lack of transparency right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
Bingo.
that's the biggest thing. It's kind of crazy. And then, yeah, I had talked about this, I think, on our first episode, but like, just like the whole like money makes policy,
Yeah.
like idea, and like the whole thing. I mean, it goes back to like lobbying as well, and like PACs, and like I learned about like the Iron Triangle in high school with like the, I don't know, I think it's like PACT law, and then senator, like representative, but like they're all just like so closely intertwined that it's like, it's a little bit scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Having worked in political advocacy before I went to graduate school, was one of the reasons that I wanted to go to graduate school and get my PhD in sociology, is I understood how difficult it is for groups, women's groups, civil rights groups, to influence policymakers. And so wanted to learn more of, theoretically, really the kind of questions that you all are asking. Why is it so difficult? Why is it flawed? Why? Why? Uh-huh. So, yeah. So maybe I can touch on my other points. They're not necessarily flaws with democracy per se, but with how our democracy is being weakened. So that's, I think, a different kind of question. Flaws versus weakness. That's why I think democracy, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but it's the best system we got.
It's the, what is Dr. Shar? She says the worst. It's the best worst option.
Yeah.
It's the least worst. The least worst option.
Yeah.
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 Or maybe I would say it's the best flawed human invention.
Yeah.
Because human beings and living together is, as I get older, I appreciate the messiness of that and the difficulty of that, and how democracies are really challenged when you have different historical legacies working in a present. So, yeah. So maybe we go to the second question, because that was
Yeah, we can go.
headed.
So our second question was, did democracy's aspirations deliver?
Yeah, I like this question, because it got me thinking about the history of the United States, right?
It's a rocky one.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a rocky one. We started off with some huge foundational inequities and violences that I don't think we fully reckoned with.
Oh yeah. I think till this day we're still at least I still process. I'm trying to process, the U.S.'s foundation is like not necessarily how I thought it originally was, I thought this is America. I live in the best country ever. I'm living here, living the American dream. And you find out like it's like I'm like on a house on a crumbling structure, And
Not so
trying to-
sexy.
Yeah. Yeah. How can I
Sexy in
rebuild
a
that?
good way here,
Mhm.
in a friendly way. Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so we have that difficult history, but the good news is that our aspirations of that founding documents has been revised a couple times, with the first Reconstruction after Civil War, where we amended the U.S. Constitution and strengthened our democracy with the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 15th Amendment, such that we dealt with some of the issues related to the foundational racism and white supremacy. And those were powerful and still are very powerful amendments that we rely on today. And then a second reconstruction of the country and those aspirations is after the civil rights movement in the 20th century. And the awesome laws that we passed in the cultural change that we experienced in seeing more folks, more of the population as social equals, whether that be people of color or women, because in both of those reconstructions, they were initiated on the basis of racial equity, but in that organizing, women also earned constitutional rights like voting, like protections in the workplace. So after the Civil War amendments were passed, we had the 19th Amendment to the Constitution where women could vote and could influence that democracy. So that is a big aspiration that was fulfilled. Unfortunately, we learned, though, that not all women had access to the ballot because of racism and institutional racism. Although we then passed, I think, the most important law of the 20th century for our democracy is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That really remedied that. And then on the heels of those voting rights and civil rights came women's rights, disability rights, gay, lesbian, bisexual community rights, and equal employment rights. And unfortunately, we also sort of have kind of gone backwards a bit when it comes to labor rights.
Yeah.
And but that's another topic. So
I'm just gonna pause real quick. Did you guys want to videotape in the study room, or are you comfortable staying like this? We can move.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
What's up? I can know the actually looks like a 6 Okay, and we're back.
All right, terrific.
All right, and I think we were talking about democracy's aspirations. You had just mentioned the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and what that led to, and how some rights we've initially gone back on, such as labor rights.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to add on?
Yeah, and of course the constitutional amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th, that is important. And then you have, since we're in college here, you had the law for equal opportunity in education.
Right.
And equity, which is Title IX, of the Educational Amendment of 1972. And that said that any educational institution receiving federal funding must provide equal opportunity in all its programs for boys and girls, women and men, and schools, universities were given, I think, about 4 years to comply with that new law. And I remember when that new law came into effect, because I was in junior high school and in Michigan, in a Detroit suburb, and it was announced that the girls were no longer just going to do rec sports in the gym after school, but we were actually going to have teams and coaches and uniforms and opportunities to play sports on a team.
Wow.
And
That's so empowering.
that was very personally empowering for me and exciting, because I was a little jock. Do they still say that word? Yeah. And I, started playing basketball with my friends, and have just the quality of the education. And so I learned about Title IX. I learned about gender equity in education from that experience. And we were living in a time where rights and protections were being expanded. And I was just a young girl who, of course, was in love with this world and all the opportunities and beauty, and didn't know better in terms of the flaws and the difficulties. But things were opening up and were positive, and you had the battle of the sexes between Billie Jean King and a male tennis player, and all the adults were talking about it. So it was a really formidable time to grow up in the 70s and come of age. And I don't think I would be a professor today or in sociology if it wasn't personally meaningful for me and my interest of it. Mm-hmm.
I think that's also, it's a good outlook that you have as well, because, despite democracy having like its flaws, it's also like we made so much progress with democracy, like I don't know if we could have gotten this far without having the representative democracy that we have, like, because it's like we were able to take our own passions and like, what we want to fight for, and because we have a democracy, like we're able to fight for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we know the value of it.
Yeah. And how important it is, and also how important it is when it's taken away,
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Well, it's very I guess exciting for me to think about in terms of that, because for me growing up, I've had all of this, there were things that I have that I don't realize where they came from, and I think a lot of us have grown up that way, especially in my generation, just kind of things that we were given, I guess, and you don't always understand how long that took to get here, and where it comes from, and just the system that we're in. When you're passionate about it and you're interested and you learn and you're educated, it can make a difference. And
totally.
Yeah,
because you can imagine yourself doing things with those opportunities, and your actual identity in yourself is empowered and changed, and that's priceless. Yeah.
Also, the timeline. That's another thing you said. For us, it's so long that we've had all these privileges, but at the same time, you're talking about the 70s. That was not that long ago.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
See how young I am.
But yeah. So that was literally the other day. Yeah. So I think that's another thing.
Seriously, it was just the other day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to, I think what you do learn in college, just and that's why I love my job, is that we're standing on the shoulders of all those people who fought for the first reconstruction of the country after the Civil War and the second reconstruction after or during and after the Civil Rights Movement. And you have heroes that you can look to and examples that you can follow. And that's really important when some folks and some powers become unbalanced and our democracy is being eroded or weakened.
Yeah.
That those are actual tools and resources that you have. That's important. So I just mentioned about going to law school, it's so good. You've got the paths, new paths are, young generations can create new paths building on the paths before. For example, when I talked about Title IX in my increased sporting participation and how those opportunities for girls and women grew in the 80s and the 90s and still are growing. But you also have your generation saying, hey, if we have equal opportunity in education in universities and colleges, and that's required, the problem of sexual violence on campuses is preventing us to have true equity in opportunities because of that and the lack of attention to it. So your generation after me, said this law applies to other domains within colleges and schools other than sports. And that is a powerful, so that legacy is, those laws can be built upon in new ways, and that's where new generations and new visions, new dreams, building on all the advantages we have, and maybe even the disadvantages that we have that inspire us to create that change, So that's an example where it's an old law, but it's still being imagined in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other notes on that?
I did. I did sort of talk about military-industrial complex. That is. That's a sticky one because we're at war right now. But I had that down as a flaw.
Yeah.
Because it's really feeding that, weakening our representations for powerful actors
Yeah.
in the military industry have using their power for a lot of our budget to go to military defense and offensive machinery. So that's another, I think, current issue, and an issue that was identified back in the 1950s.
Yeah. I actually
as a
just
potential problem.
right before this had my philosophy class, and we learned about the just war theory,
Yeah.
which was created by St. Augustine, long time ago. So he's a Catholic and Christian saint, and the theories still apply to today. And we learned about what even is a just war? Can you consider war just? Can you justify it? And there's 6 principles before you even start a war that you have to make sure. If you just break one, then it's not just. And 6 sounds like a lot because it is. It's it takes a lot for for a nation to come to war, and currently now. This sounds so bad, but it was 1 second I'm hearing about possibly going to war, and then, we're already doing it. And I feel as a citizen, you just it kind of sometimes just flies by you, and what do you do? And I think that's why we have this podcast now, because we're trying to figure out what can we do, like why, how can I
Wow.
be involved?
That's powerful. That was part of the inspiration for the podcast.
I think not just the war initially, but everything that's going on right now.
Oh, really?
And so I just really like how, I just wanted to input how everything's tying up
Yeah.
in my brain. And
Yeah, and when we were kind of like figuring out like what we wanted this to be, I guess for me it was like I want to figure out like why. I guess I want to be more educated. So like I want to understand like why it's, I guess, like hard for me to like figure these things out and like kind of be involved and like get involved, and like why that's kind of what I also feel is like a problem with our generation. Like definitely it's not something that's like prioritized. I don't know if that's the right word to use. Maybe like it's just ignorance on our part.
Yeah.
But that was definitely something I wanted to know more about. So all of this is just really helpful and like kind of just exploring and like being curious, I guess, and like challenging the things that we know. So it's definitely, it's all very interesting and like important is what I would say as well.
Have you all heard of an organization called League of Women Voters?
I haven't.
No.
And sounds interesting, though. Tell us more.
Okay. So, League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. So, it's not affiliated with any political party. It's a membership organization that's organized at the national, state, and local levels. So, here in Doña County, we have a League of Women Voters of Doña County. And it's one of the first organizations that I joined when I moved here 17 years ago. And I picked that organization because it's nonpartisan.
Yeah.
And working for the state of New Mexico, I thought it would a good choice. But they formed in 1920, or after 1920, with the Equal Rights Amendment was passed. And they formed in order to educate women, first of all, of political participation, democracy, voting, etc. And now they encourage everybody to participate in a democracy through electoral politics, for education, and they do studies, for example, and I helped with a study back in 2013 with the League of Women Voters group to look at quality of life issues in Doña County. And so what the organization does is studies issues, creates policy, documents, recommendations that are not partisan, but are just good governance. And so that is an example of a pro-democracy organization that is at all levels of society that are about educating people to strengthen our democracy. And interestingly, in my Social 101 course in previous years, I invited them to class, and we would do workshops in actual conversation, just like this one, almost literally. And we over 2 class periods, a couple weeks apart, just sat down and talked about democracy. What's it good for? What questions we have. So this podcast in effort is brilliant. That is how democracy happens, at the very much of educating ourselves, talking to one another's across our differences, and so I applaud your efforts in that. And
much credit to Dr. Hirschard, because he's the one, who really like pushed these podcasts. So
good. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Bravo to her. Thank you for her.
Yeah, shout out.
Shout out. Yeah.
shout out on the podcast.
That's her.
Did you have anything else on aspirations, or should we move?
Let's see. Yeah, let's move on. I did.
Yeah, I was gonna sound very nice.
Well, when they came, I thought, let me jot down my notes straight away so I don't come on Wednesday and say, Okay, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Time management issue. So, yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So I think it was, yeah, our next question is, what is our empirical evidence? And when I think of empirical evidence, I'm like, well, what does empirical even mean? So I think my first question for you would be, what do you think of when someone says empirical evidence?
Observable,
Okay.
knowable,
Is it measurable?
measurable,
Something?
possibly, although, yeah, measurable. Yeah, something that you use your senses to know. Some evidence is material assertions about social reality that demonstrates levels of accountability, for example. But yeah, in this case, what is the evidence for a strong democracy? Empirical evidence for a weak democracy or changing democracy. Yeah.
And what were your thoughts?
Well,
Like, what is our empirical evidence?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said about outcomes.
Okay.
All right. And opportunities. So, evidence to show that there are equal opportunities. You know, was a job on campus, say, that's advertised to everybody, or was somebody just on the inside got the job quickly?
Yeah.
That would be evidence of whether there was opportunity for all or lack of opportunity for all. So, and then when it comes to outcomes, equitable treatment, you can have, you can look at, who's getting the jobs, who are in those jobs. Are some groups and social statuses missing in those jobs? And maybe there's equal opportunity to apply and compete for the jobs, but are there weaknesses of accountability in the hiring process per se? And then you can start getting empirical evidence that there's inequities. And so empirical evidence is huge when you're talking about within our civil rights and our human rights, that you could go to a court of law, back to the rule of law. You bring evidence, empirical evidence to the court that there's a lack of equal opportunity in employment, or that there's discrimination in the process of hiring or promotion, the outcomes. Yeah.
You probably, that's a really good response. Yeah. I was like, I hadn't thought about that actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why the difference between equality and equity is so critical, because it has to do with, it's different types of empirical evidence for opportunities, a lot easier to come by than actual outcomes. Okay, so I guess I can give an example. I gave an example of this university, for example. How many women presidents have there been? Since, 1888?
Yeah. No clue.
Well, my last count was, out of all the years since 1888, there was 3 or 4 years where this institution was headed by a woman.
Wow. Oh, I thought it was gonna be way more.
Yeah. So we...
Was that 3 years all by one woman?
No, 2.
2.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so 2 women.
2 women. That was one was an interim president and one was actually hired, but she lasted but 2 years.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and in terms of people of color, there is a bit more, or men of color, about 5 or 6 years, represented by a man of color, Hispanic, mostly. So you have, anybody can apply, equal opportunity. That's one measure. And another measure of empirical evidence is, well, did you have any female candidates or people of color candidates in the application pool? And then you start looking at biases and not only discrimination, but positive actions to encourage equal outcomes, to encourage equal opportunity,
Right.
like affirmative actions, like effort, extra effort. It's sort of like going back to my junior high. All of a sudden now we get uniforms and coaches and, doesn't mean I'm going to be a good basketball player, but at least I have a chance and know the rules, and then I may be able to. Well, I'm too short to be a basketball player. But in graduate school, I did play ice hockey
Oh, wow.
as a graduate student at Ohio State University. Being from Detroit, I know how to ice skate. And in Ohio, if you know how to ice skate, you're good at hockey.
That's good. Team.
So, yeah.
I didn't know that about
That's-
the president. It's pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it now, I mean, our current president's not a female, it's male. But, he's not even like American. He actually came from Italy. So that's pretty cool to think about too. Like,
Yeah.
not even just different ethnicity opportunities as well,
Bringing new ways. And he has a husband. So that is first LBGT. No. It's not the first LBGT president, but one of the interim female presidents was a lesbian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't get the job. She,
I was gonna say, I can imagine that caused some controversy.
yeah, she's now the president, though, of another university. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yay, her.
Yay, her, yeah. And you can. And yay us for hiring a gay man.
Yeah, that's a big
That's important.
step.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah.
Who was I talking about this one? I think it was in one of my classes. I'm learning everything from my classes right now.
No.
Oh, in my accounting class, actually. We were learning about, your target market
Yeah.
and how Target actually, they, have this whole thing going on. I think it's called DEI. I
Yeah.
want to say, yeah. And, they were like, had all these like people like protesting for like LGBTQ rights in front of their shops. And well, they got a lot of lash for it, a lot of people didn't like it. And so they like actually turned against it, and then they started taking that away. But what they didn't realize is that most of their customers and the people that they serve were actually part of that LGBTQ community. And because they didn't really focus on more about their customers, but more about like their critics, they got a lot of people that actually ended up boycotting them, and they got even more hate for that. And it led to this whole other thing. And Target's, still trying to come back from that, like, financially.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
we're looking at in my class. So,
Oh,
yeah.
accounting class. Yeah, because I know African Americans also organized boycott of that DEI of not focusing on hiring African
Yeah,
Americans.
because they were excluding people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
that's heavy.
nice. I mean, it's not nice,
Nice to talk about.
but we're coming into, again, the full circles of the empirical evidence. And, it's part of how you make change and also measure backlashes
Yeah.
of loss of rights. Like, reproductive freedoms, for example. Yeah.
Perfect.
Lockdown.
Yeah.
I think this is a good part to switch on to our last conversation. because-
Perfect.
Yeah. So with all of the flaws and, we've heard our aspirations and now, some of the constraints that we face, what are the political alternatives?
Understood.
Yeah. To democracy,
You know,
I think
democratic rule.
Yeah.
Other opportunities can range from monarchy,
it's embarrassing.
of course, which we,
yeah,
of course, rejected from our founding.
naturally.
Authoritarianism,
And close to dictatorship.
dictatorships, fascism, are all those. But I think if we think of authoritarianism, it's kind of one of the more rising models, alternative models that's happening across the world and in the country, where the political perspective, which folks call, extreme right-wing authoritarianism. And I suppose you could have any kind of political bent to it, but where small number of people or an oligarchy or a single person rules and is the decision maker. So that is not a good in my personal opinion,
Yeah.
is not a good alternative.
Definitely.
So is this question, what are the political alternatives?
I'll say.
Viable alternatives or good alternatives? Anything better alternatives?
Yeah, I would say because all the ones you mentioned, I immediately ruled out.
I know. I just was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, I guess I was thinking more, maybe not essentially like a political alternative, but maybe a political party. That's really hard though, because, we have such a big two-party system.
I also wrote down, that.
Yeah, I know we have like that one third party, libertarian kind of,
And the Green Party.
and the Green
So,
Party.
yeah.
But they still, they come smaller in numbers, but they're there.
Yes. Yeah.
Push.
But yeah, democracies are organized very differently throughout the globe.
But it's no right.
Whether it be in South Africa after apartheid days. And I say apartheid because that was my research for my dissertation. I was looking at post-apartheid South Africa and looking at democratic change.
The meat's cuts.
I happened to look at it through women's sports. There's a thread here. But there's parliamentary democracies rather than representative, and they can vary, and there's advantages to folks.
So I know what you.
A lot of European countries also has parliaments and multiple parties, and then in South Africa they have multiple parties, and then they made it a requirement for political parties when they put forward their list of who's going to be representing that party. There were goals of having 50% women or whatever percent people of color, depending on the demographics of the country. So that multiple party system and parliamentary system has improved a lot of in the terms of representation, because there's different mechanisms you can use within parties. But our parties are private political parties, and it's a slightly different system. Yeah, so. But I remember a student asked, she didn't believe in democracy because it was flawed. And, I was like, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yes, flawed, weak. But the question, we have made improvements, serious improvements, and we are trying to make more improvements and aspirations. And it's the best system we have under the sun here. And actually, the roots of our democracy
What?
that I'm learning about more and more, and the roots of women's rights movement in this country rely quite a bit, although we're not taught this, on indigenous ways of ruling and governing themselves of Native Americans. And I'm thinking in particular the Haudenosaunee Confederation in the Northeast. That was a confederation of 6 different tribes that were warring, and they made a pact, the 6 fires, I believe, and laid out a way for democratic rule and peace within the Confederation of Nations. And the suffragettes back in working for women's rights and the vote got the idea from the Native American folks in northern New York, where the first women's convention took place. And so the Haudenosaunee laid out a roadmap that we actually rely quite a bit on. It's not the same system, but it is a model that is an alternative model that we have used in our democracy, although we had those major flaws in our foundation that sort of violate those. But I think the history, the more we learn about the history and more can learn from how human beings govern themselves over time, and not just the last 200 years, I think is a source of information and inspiration that can serve us well in strengthening our model of democracy and in giving credit to that actual history.
Yeah, I agree. I would also say I think it is important, like, to see other democracies, and see how are other countries governing, what's working, what's not, what can we take from them to improve our system as well.
Yeah.
So that's very important.
Yeah. There's this big book. It's like 700, 800 pages that I only got to like 150 out of it. That was written by an anthropologist and an archaeologist that study human history. And they argued that a lot of ways we've organized ourselves over time is very diverse and very experimental and very creative and very open, and a lot building on indigenous peoples and older civilizations, and that they gave an optimistic view rather than focusing on the histories of slavery or histories of colonization, etc., and war making, but they saw human ability and creativity by experimenting with all sorts of good ways of being, not this simple understanding of human history as a progressive march to more and more civilized in democratic ways, that there are things we can learn from the past still that have a empirical record out there that we can rely on. And so I think that is important when we think about our frustrations with our democracy and how they're not working, that human beings are very creative and very, and if we learn from the past, I think that pessimistic view of backsliding and backlashes and losing rights is, I think, helpful to sort of not get us stuck in one way, but be more experimental also, and in realizing that it's a big challenge. It's not an easy thing to coexist.
Yeah, so I think, I guess what I got from today and like the previous podcast is like it really just all comes back down to like education and just challenging like what we know and like our beliefs and like following that, and conversation is the biggest thing. Like if you don't agree with someone, like to talk with them and like figure out like compromise, like what can we do. Like I think just like cooperation is like really important when it comes to like democracy, and like democracy allows us to do that when it's done correctly.
Right.
And that's really, I think that's like why it's the best to honestly. So
Yeah. Some people describe democracy as a series of endless meetings and talking.
yeah.
They
Slow.
love to talk, so we love to chat. That'll be good for us.
You're all doing a great job of thinking up questions and learning along the way. And I thank you for the opportunity to join you in this conversation, because it's something close to my heart, and why I enjoy being a professor.
Yeah. Well, thank you also for to speak with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to like, get the notes and educating us further as well. Stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'll put a selfie.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for listening to Democracy is Sexy. Please check out the other podcast videos if you haven't.